Hello, everyone. It's great to have you back with us.
Really glad you're here. We've got a massive topic today.
We really do. And right up front, I just want to say you're on the Smart Capital School of Financial Literacy channel.
Yeah.
So we aren't just going to look at the surface level stuff today.
Right. No balloons or baby kissing today.
Exactly. We're diving into a topic that sits right at the intersection of power and psychology and, well, a massive amount of cash.
And that engine runs on one very specific fuel: money. Lots and lots of it.
We're talking about U.S. elections. And usually when we discuss elections, we get this very romanticized high school civics class version of events.
The whole Festival of Democracy angle.
Yeah, the debates and voting booths and those little I voted stickers. It all feels very pure.
Very democratic.
But the stack of sources we are breaking down today suggests something totally different. The central thesis here is that the outcome of an election is often decided long before anyone actually casts a ballot.
That's right. The argument is that the winner isn't necessarily chosen by the voters on election day, but rather by the investors during the fundraising cycle.
Investors.
Yeah, the donors.
Yeah.
We are looking at a system where money determines the menu and the voters just get to pick from what's left on the plate.
And the scale of this financial machine is just staggering. I mean, we aren't talking about a local bake sale here. In the last U.S. election cycle, the total spend was over $16 billion.
$16 billion. Just to put that into perspective for you, that is larger than the annual budgets of about 70 different entire nations.
It's a massive industry.
It really is.
So our mission for this deep dive is to follow that money. We want to explain how a $1,000 gift is considered a bribe, but a $10 million gift is somehow considered policy influence.
Or free speech.
Right? Free speech.
Mm-hmm.
We want to figure out why 8 out of 10 Americans say they absolutely hate this system, yet every 4 years it just gets more expensive.
And to do that, we have to start with the most basic question. Why is the burn rate so high? Why does a candidate need millions of dollars just to apply for the job?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, couldn't you just stand on a soapbox in the town square with a megaphone and just tell people your ideas? Why does that cost $16 billion?
Well, in 1850, sure, grab the soapbox. But today, you are competing in the most fragmented, noisy media environment in human history.
Right.
Let's break down the actual bill for a standard congressional race. Imagine you want to run for the House of Representatives. You are looking at a district of about 700,000 people.
Okay, 700,000 people. That's a decent-sized city.
And here's the harsh reality. Statistically, 0 of them know who you are.
Ouch.
Yeah. You might be brilliant. You might have the best policy ideas in the world, but if you are invisible, you lose. So you have to buy visibility.
And visibility is a commodity.
A commodity priced at an absolute premium.
So walk us through the receipt. What am I buying?
Let's start with television. Even in the digital age, TV is still king for older voters who actually turn out to vote consistently.
Okay.
To buy just 30 seconds of prime time on a local affiliate channel, you are looking at about $5,000.
$5,000 for 30 seconds. I mean, that's steep. But if I save up, maybe I can do that once or twice.
But once or twice is literally burning your money.
Why?
Marketing science tells us that for a message to stick, for a voter to actually remember your name when they walk into the booth, they need frequency.
Right. They need to see it a lot.
Exactly. They need to see your face 7 to 10 times a week.
So you can't just buy one spot. I have to buy a total bombardment.
You do. To get that kind of frequency, you are spending roughly $50,000 a week. That is $200,000 a month just for TV.
Wow.
In one single media market.
Okay, well, my savings account is already completely empty, and we haven't even talked about the internet yet.
And the internet is just as brutal. You need digital ads on Google and Facebook and Instagram. To optimize the algorithm and actually target the specific demographics you need, you're looking at another $20,000 a week.
It just doesn't stop.
And then you have the physical world. Billboards are $3,000 a month. And then the mailers.
Oh, the junk mail. My mailbox is absolutely stuffed with them every October.
It feels like junk to you, but it's gold for the campaign consultants. To design and print and ship a glossy mailer to 100,000 households costs about $50,000 per round.
Per round?
Yes, because just like with TV, you have to send 3 or 4 rounds. Because most people, like you, throw the first one in the trash without even looking at it.
I definitely toss the first 2. So you're paying $50,000 just to get past my recycling bin.
Precisely. And then you add the ground game. You need field offices. You need to pay staff salaries. You need buses and lighting and sound systems for rallies.
Logistics.
Right. And you need lawyers. A lot of
Really, a
lawyers.
lot of lawyers.
Compliance. Election laws are incredibly complex. You need a team of attorneys just to make sure you aren't accidentally breaking the law while you spend all this cash.
So what's the grand total?
When you total up the tab just to have a seat at the table, just to be considered a serious candidate for a House seat, the floor is about $1.5 million.
That's just the entry fee.
That's the bare minimum. If it's a competitive seat, you're looking at $5 million to $10 million. For a Senate seat, it's tens of millions.
And the presidency.
You need hundreds of millions just to survive the primary elections.
So this creates a massive filter right out of the gate. Unless you are personally a multimillionaire, you have to go get that money from someone else.
Exactly.
But this is where I get confused, and I think a lot of our listeners do too. I thought there were strict rules about this. I thought I could only give a candidate like $3,000.
You are absolutely right. There are rules, but you have to think of it like a building. There is a front door and a side door.
Okay, front door first.
The front door is the official regulated limit. As an individual, you can only donate a maximum of $3,300 to a candidate per election. That's it.
$3,300. That seems pretty sensible. It prevents a billionaire from just writing a check for $20 million to a candidate and basically owning them.
Theoretically, yes, and that money is fully transparent. If you donate over $200, your name and your employer and your address are listed on the Federal Election Commission website. Anyone can look it up.
So what happened?
The game changed fundamentally on January 21st, 2010.
The day the side door was kicked open.
Exactly. This is the date of the Supreme Court ruling in Citizens United versus FEC. Now, people talk about this case all the time, but they often get the actual details wrong.
Right.
It wasn't about a guy handing a politician a bag of cash. It was actually about a movie.
A movie?
Yes. A nonprofit group called Citizens United wanted to air a documentary that was highly critical of Hillary Clinton right before the 2008 primaries. But the law at the time, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, said that corporations and nonprofits were banned from spending money on electioneering communications within 60 days of an election.
So the government basically said you can't show this movie because it's a political ad disguised as a film and it's too close to the election.
Exactly. So Citizens United sued. They argued that this was censorship. They said we have a First Amendment right to free speech, and showing a film is speech.
And it went to the Supreme Court.
All the way. And in a 5-4 decision, the court sided with them.
And the logic there was that spending money to spread a message is a form of speech.
Correct. The court ruled that because corporations are associations of people, they have speech rights too. And therefore, the government cannot limit their political spending without limiting their free speech.
So the dam broke.
It completely shattered. This ruling paved the way for another court decision called SpeechNow.org, which effectively created the massive loophole we live in today.
How does that work?
The court said strict limits apply if you give money directly to a candidate. But if you spend money independently to support them, meaning you don't coordinate with their actual campaign, you can raise and spend unlimited amounts.
And just like that, the Super P was born.
The Political Action Committee on steroids. A super PAC is an organization that is formally independent of the candidate. Because they are independent, they aren't bound by that $3,300 limit.
So they can take anything.
They can take a check for $10 million or $50 million or $100 million from a single donor.
But let's be real here. How independent are they really? Because if I'm running a super PAC for a candidate and I'm their best friend, aren't we basically on the same team?
It's a total charade. The law says you can't coordinate. That means I can't call the candidate and ask, should we run the ad on Tuesday or Wednesday? But the reality is that these super PACs are often run by the candidate's former campaign manager. They use the exact same B-roll footage. The candidate can even appear at the super PAC's fundraisers to quote-unquote thank donors as long as they don't explicitly ask for the big check themselves.
The sources for this deep dive highlighted some really wild examples of this from the 2024 election.
It was really the cycle where the super PAC took over completely. You had Donald Trump's campaign merchandising his mugshot, raising $7 million in small donations directly. That's front door money.
Right.
But then on the flip side, you had Elon Musk starting a super PAC and injecting $75 million into it. That's side door money.
And Musk really tested the boundaries of how these things operate. There was that whole controversy with the lottery.
That was a fascinating legal moment. Musk offered $1 million a day to random voters in swing states who signed a petition.
Yeah.
To the average person, that looked like a lottery. It looked like gambling.
Which is illegal to run without a license.
Right. And vote buying is also illegal. So the Department of Justice flagged it. When Musk's lawyers had to go to court to defend it, they had to drop the act entirely.
What did they say?
They admitted on the record it's not a lottery. The winners aren't random. We are selecting them as paid speakers.
Wow. So they admitted it was a coordinated payout operation just to avoid gambling laws.
Exactly. And that's the scale we are dealing with now. In 2010, the first year of super PACs, they spent about $300 million. By 2024, that number was around $5 billion.
$5 billion.
That is a 15 times increase in just over a decade.
That is astronomical growth. But there is still one catch with the super PAC. If Elon Musk writes that check, we know about it. His name is on the list.
Correct. Disclosure is still required. And for many corporations or wealthy individuals who want to influence policy but don't want the public backlash, that's a real problem. They don't want to alienate 50% of their customers by supporting a controversial candidate.
Which brings us to the side door of the side door. The shadowy world of dark money.
Before we unlock that door, I want to take a quick second here. Thank you for joining us. Let us know in the comments how you like this format of video analysis and what topics you'd like us to cover in future videos.
Absolutely. We read all of those. Dark money. This sounds like something out of a spy novel. How do you spend billions of dollars on an election without anyone knowing who you are?
You use a specific type of nonprofit, usually a 501c4. These are tax-exempt organizations that are supposed to be for social welfare. Think of groups that save the whales or promote literacy or advocate for clean air.
But they can do politics.
They can, as long as politics isn't their primary activity.
Mhm.
But the definition of primary is very loose. Here is the mechanism, the shell game.
Yeah.
A donor gives $10 million to the 501c4 nonprofit. Because it's a nonprofit, they do not have to disclose their donors to the public. That money is now totally anonymous.
It's washed.
Exactly. Then the nonprofit writes a check to a super PAC. The super PAC has to report where they got the money, so they report receiving $10 million from, quote, the Committee for Good Governance, unquote.
Right.
But if you try to look up who gave money to the committee, the trail just ends.
So the public sees the ad on TV, they see the sponsor's name, but they have zero way of knowing who actually wrote the check.
Yeah.
It could be a corporation or a billionaire or anyone.
Precisely. In 2012, there was about $300 million in dark money. In 2024, nearly $2 billion.
$2 billion of completely untraceable cash.
Yes. And here is where the story flips on its head regarding political parties.
Yeah, I think the common assumption is that this is primarily a Republican tool. You know, the party of big business and Wall Street and oil companies. You'd think they would be the ones loving this dark money system.
That was absolutely the expectation. But the data shows something very different. Despite publicly criticizing the Citizens United decision and calling for campaign finance reform, the Democrats have absolutely mastered this machine.
The sources mentioned a specific fund, the 1630 Fund.
Yes. In the 2020 cycle, the 1630 Fund, which is a massive liberal dark money hub, spent $61 million. For the first time in history, left-wing dark money actually outspent right-wing dark money.
That is a massive irony. You have the party that says we need to get money out of politics, utilizing the most opaque money in politics.
It is. But the strategists call it unilateral disarmament.
What does that mean?
The argument is we hate this weapon, but if we put it down while the other side is holding it, we will be destroyed. So both sides just keep escalating.
Not just the Republicans with the Koch network pushing deregulation.
Right. The Cox Americans for Prosperity spends huge slims, but the Democrats counter it. You see it in the small dollar game, too. Democrats built Act Blue. Republicans built WinRed.
Act Blue processed something like $4 billion recently. It's huge.
Yeah.
But even with the small donors, there are tricks. The source detailed a pretty nasty scandal with the Trump campaign and WinRed.
This was the pre-checked box scandal. Donors would go online to give $100. But hidden in the fine print, there was a pre-checked box that authorized a weekly recurring donation.
Oh, wow.
People didn't realize it until their bank accounts were literally being drained. They had to refund $64 million because of fraud complaints. It just shows the sheer desperation for liquidity.
It seems like there's an entire industry sitting in the middle of all this cash. It's not just the politician and the donor. There are people getting very, very rich off this $16 billion flow.
We call it the consultant industrial complex. This is a crucial insight. Between the donor writing the check and the voter seeing the TV ad, there are media consultants. Typically, they take a percentage of the ad buy, usually around 15%.
Wait, let me get this straight. If I'm a consultant and I tell my candidate, you really need to spend $10 million on TV ads to win this state, I personally pocket $1.5 million of that.
Exactly. You are structurally incentivized to advise them to spend more, regardless of whether the ad is actually effective.
That's a huge conflict of interest.
It is. These consultants earned about $1.5 billion in fees in 2020 alone. The source actually compares their compensation to top-tier neurosurgeons. And the kicker, they get paid whether the candidate wins or loses.
That is a nice gig if you can get it.
Yeah.
No wonder costs are going up. The advisors make more money if the campaign is more expensive.
It creates a self-perpetuating cycle of inflation. But we've talked about the consultants. We also have to talk about the people actually collecting the checks, the bundlers.
I love the names they give these people, pioneers and rangers.
It sounds like a scout troop, doesn't it? Those terms come from the Bush era. A bundler is essentially human infrastructure for fundraising.
Right.
Because of that $3,300 individual limit we talked about, a rich person can't just write a massive check to the candidate directly. But if they can convince 100 of their wealthy friends to each write a maximum check, they can bundle them together.
So they walk into the candidate's office with a stack of checks totaling $330,000 and say, this is from me and my network.
Exactly. It's a way to bypass the limitation of influence. And these bundlers aren't doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. The source analysis shows a direct correlation between being a top-tier bundler and receiving government appointments.
Like ambassadorships.
It's the classic reward. You raise $500,000, maybe you become the ambassador to France or the Bahamas. It is a system of patronage that is fully operational today.
This brings us to the really uncomfortable question of corruption. Because usually when we say corruption, we think of a bribe. A briefcase full of cash in a dark alley for a specific vote on a specific bill.
Right. That is quid pro quo. That is highly illegal. Get caught doing that, you go to federal prison. The system we are describing is more like legalized corruption. You aren't buying a specific vote. You are buying access and time.
The sources mentioned a metric called call time. And honestly, this was the most depressing part of the research for me.
It is the dirty secret of Washington. A typical congressman or senator spends between 3 to 4 hours per day doing call time.
Every day.
They go to a separate call center because doing it from their official congressional office would be illegal. And they sit in a little cubicle and cold call donors.
3 to 4 hours a day. That's half a workday.
Think about the psychological impact of that. If you spend half your waking professional life talking to millionaires and billionaires, listening to their problems, hearing about their tax concerns or their regulatory headaches, whose perspective are you going to understand better?
You certainly aren't hearing from the single mom working 2 jobs in your district. You're hearing from the hedge fund manager you talk to every Tuesday.
It absolutely shapes your reality. And the data backs this up. There was a major study cited in our sources that showed when the preferences of the wealthy diverge from the preferences of the general public, the laws that get passed almost always align with the wealthy.
So if the public wants something but the donor class hates it, it rarely passes. So why doesn't it change? I mean, if 80% of people hate it, and even the politicians complain about the misery of sitting in a cubicle doing call time, why are we stuck here?
It's a classic catch-22. First, the people in power, the ones who would have to vote to change the laws, got into power by mastering this specific system. They are the winners of this game. Why would they change the rules that made them winners?
Right. And then you have the partisan gridlock we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Democrats often propose acts like the Disclose Act to force dark money into the light. Republicans block them, arguing it violates the First Amendment and donor privacy. But meanwhile, Democrats are using that dark money system just as aggressively to win elections. It's a standoff.
It's a financial arms race.
Yeah.
And just like the Cold War, you just keep building bigger piles of weapons, or in this case, money to ensure you aren't destroyed.
And the ultimate result is that money defines the boundaries of what is politically possible. Before a single vote is cast in the primaries, the money primary has already happened.
The invisible primary.
Candidates who can't raise millions drop out early. Issues that threaten big donors are quietly taken off the table. The menu of options is curated by the investors before the voters ever get to the restaurant.
That is a really powerful analogy. We get to choose, but only from the options that money has approved.
Precisely. And as we look toward future elections with the rise of AI and even more expensive digital targeting, the costs are only going to go up. The $16 billion record will almost certainly be broken in the very next cycle.
Well, on that cheery note, look, this is heavy stuff, but understanding the mechanics is the only way to actually see the game for what it is.
Knowledge is the first step. When you see a negative ad now, or you see a candidate surging out of nowhere, to ask who is funding this, which super PIC is behind it, what is the return on investment they are expecting?
Absolutely. It changes how you watch the news.
And it raises the final provocative question I'd like to leave everyone with. In a system where the boundaries of debate are set by donors before voting starts, does the election reflect the will of the people or just the consensus of the investors? Are we voters or are we just the audience for a show produced by billionaires?
Something to think about next time you see that I voted sticker. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel, like it, and see you in the next retelling.